Three, two, one. Hello, universe. It's officially spring, and spring tends to be a time of rebirth of new ideas. As the show's picked up steam and many audience members are writing to me thanks to you, they keep writing to me about what it's like to be an entrepreneur, how to start a business, how they can level up their life. And I often reply back with being an entrepreneur is hard. And I've said this on the show before, the highs are highs and the lows are lows. I want you to imagine a world where you have a startup idea. Let's just say your idea is a social shopping reselling app and it gets rejected by 200 plus investors. And this is after you've already had a successful exit as a founder in a prior consumer tech company. Even with this track record, even with degrees, plural degrees from IIT Kanpur, a master's in computer science from UT Austin, and an MBA from UC Berkeley, you would feel pretty bad. Maybe even doubt yourself. Not sure if your idea is any good anymore. That would be normal, people. But imagine if you persevered anyways, and to then be turned down by every single payment processor in the country. It would be hard. Now imagine if the United States Postal General shows up at your door because you discovered that your startup unknowingly was in violation of USPS regulations. And your startup, on top of all of that, almost ran out of money. Yeah, it's hard. But remember how I just said the lows are low and the highs are highs? This fairy tale sounds super stressful right now, but don't worry. This is a happy show with a happy story. Meet Manish Chandra, founder, CEO of Poshmark. Poshmark is a social shopping reselling app. You know that startup I was referring to? Poshmark, I'm happy to report, is now considered one of the most successful marketplaces of all time. This company has more people making money on it than Airbnb, Lyft, Uber, and Etsy combined. In fact, 1 in 5 people in America are on Poshmark. A sale is made every second in just the US alone. And just 70 days ago, Poshmark went public. See, I told you this has a happy ending. Hi, Manish.
Hi, Alexandra. Great to see you again.
How are you?
Doing well, doing well. It's been a while.
First of all, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Living here in Silicon Valley and even just watching the news, I think it feels like sometimes everyone is going public. But in reality, it's a super, super rarefied world. And I think that's why people want to know what that's like. Like, what was a day like for you?
It was surreal. I mean, going into it was surreal. It was the whole journey to go from being a private company to a public company is full of a lot of different sort of steps and processes and checkpoints. So when you go through all of that, it's a miracle. Even after you have a good business, to sort of go through that process and become public is just a hard journey. And for us, there were just all these compounding factors. COVID, where roadshow takes you into the offices of investors and you fly around. We were not meeting anybody. I could even barely meet my chief financial officer because of COVID. So we were doing it on Zoom. The day we launched our IPO was actually the day that riots broke out in the Capitol. So everyone was distracted. And so it was an interesting sort of process and a journey, but I had belief that we will be successful. In fact, my wife Asha commented on one of the evenings when all this thing was happening that you seem surprisingly calm. And I said, if universe has brought me to this point, I'm sure we'll have a successful IPO. And we did have a very successful IPO. And the opening day was definitely a very surreal time because my mother, who I respect very much and has been very much a part of my life, would have been here with me, but she was attending through Zoom, and so was my family in India. My daughter was also attending from Zoom, so it was kind of a interesting sort of journey, but it was still amazing to have gone through it, and now to be a place where we really feel that we are at the beginning stages of building a very large company. So even though we're public, we feel the opportunity is so big that it's just energizing to continue to build the company.
Yeah, well, I have to ask, which I never thought I would ask a business person. I feel like I'm asking someone on the red carpet, but what are you wearing?
Oh, I'm wearing a Ted Baker shirt, a Arcturus jacket. I actually have a pair of Gucci sneakers that you can see, and jeans. And so everything from Poshmark, of course.
Of
That's,
course. Do you think starting Poshmark made you a better dresser or more aware of fashion?
oh, for sure. Oh, for
Yeah.
sure. I think their journey from going from an enterprise software person to becoming a fashion consumer community person over the last 15 years, certainly one of the things it has improved is my entire passion for clothing and sort of what I do here, but also sustainable clothing. Like, really, I want
Yeah.
clothing to be something that perpetually lives on and doesn't go out and damages the environment.
Yeah. That's so true. And I think like with the advent of Marie Kondo and that craze and having extra time, like when the pandemic started, the first 2 weeks, I was kind of like, I was okay with it. I really needed the break. And after I cleaned every corner of my house using Marie Kondo's method, obviously Poshmark was such a great resource.
Well,
um,
absolutely. I don't know if you know that we just partnered with Marie Kondo to do a whole
oh, you
campaign with them.
did?
Yes, yes.
Oh, I didn't
We
know
just
that.
started to talk about a whole tidying up thing, and she's become a spokesperson for Poshmark, and we just launched it like this Saturday.
Oh wow, I'll have to check that out. But I guess speaking of celebrities, can we even imagine that a woman who literally teaches us how to clean and organize is a celebrity? Like life is so weird. But speaking of celebrities, you actually have celebrities on your board, Serena Williams. You have celebrity investors like Rachel Zoe, Ashton Kutcher.
Yes,
That
we
must have been
do. We do. Yeah. And Serena has been just a really great partner. She joined our board way back actually in 2018 and has been really instrumental in all of the steps in becoming a public company. We have a really great board. We have the former president of Old Navy, Jenny Mink,
wow.
who's on our board. Certainly have our core investors, Naveen Chadha, who's our first funder, Hans, John Med from Temasek, and then Jeff Epstein, who was the CFO at Oracle and CFO at DoubleClick. So, kind of a really
That's
good board that
interesting.
has helped me in guiding on this journey to become a public company.
Yeah. Well, I think that's super exciting. And I'm such a fangirl of like Serena Williams. So that's like I'm so interested in hearing stories about that later. But speaking of journeys, we're friends, but I found out in the process of Google stalking you from like an outside perspective, not a friend perspective, a lot of interesting things about you that I did not know. Number one, you are like a child genius. You graduated from high school at age 15.
Yes, yes. I moved around. So, my father was a judge, and instead of losing grades, I ended up gaining a couple of years as I was moving around. And I finished my 12th grade at 15 and took the train to go to college. It was kind of an interesting journey. I was super young compared to the rest of the class. In fact, initially they couldn't believe that I was 15, so we would have some interesting discussions with my college mates.
I bet. Were you living in the dorms or were you just taking the train to
No,
commute?
I was living in the dorm. So yeah, it was how my kids say, Dad, your journey becomes more and more complicated. But my journey was really complicated. Going from home, I would take a train, get down, then take a bus. Then bus would take me to the gates of IIT. Then from there you take a rickshaw, and then you sort of get in. Sorry, the bus would take me to the center of the town in Kanpur. From there you take a tempo to the gates of IIT, and then you take a rickshaw. So it was like a four-step journey every time you went to college.
Wow. That is crazy. So you grew up in India, and I did also read that you spent a lot of time with your grandfather in Chandni Chowk, right? So he had a
Yes.
business. Tell me about that.
Yeah, my grandfather was a pharmacist. He was a wholesale pharmacist, and my mom would tell me he was my nana, so she would send me to spend time with him, and he would take us to the shop, because what would we do all day at his house? So he would take one or two of us kids to the shop, and we would just hang out the whole day. And in those times, even though you're 10 or 11, you had a lot of freedom to walk around the whole market, and so I saw people in action, people negotiating, people transacting, people talking to each other, people haggling, and people just sort of laughing and having a good time, even though they were like buying and selling hardware or pharmacies. So that just was sort of my impression growing up of what shopping should be. And a lot of that
Yeah.
sort of is something that we've carried over in many of the things we've designed in Poshmark, like conversations, like live events, like negotiation, but all done in a very contemporary sort of e-commerce way. So you have access to the best of both worlds. On one side, you have amazing physical kind of a sense of social, and then on the other side, you have all of the advantages of e-commerce. And then the third piece is really sustainability. You can become a seller by just selling stuff you have. And in India, even at that time, and I'm sure it's more today, but at that time, a lot of stuff was never thrown away. It was recycled all the way down to paper, forgetting about clothing, but metal, everything was sort of moved around and conserved. And that sort of mindset has been there in our culture for a long time because we were not rich. So we had to sort of move things around from the very beginning. And today we need to do it to save the world in a
Yes.
way.
Yeah. I think the other sort of interesting thing I wonder is, so my grandfather used to have a shop in India too. And one of the things that I remember as a vast difference being raised here and then going to India is that all the shopkeepers really knew each other, like really had a conversation, like the first few hours of the day. In fact, maybe most of the day
Yeah.
was just catching up with each other and forming community. Did you find that to be your experience too?
Yes, very much so. They were connected to each other and they were connected to their customers, right? So you would
Yeah.
walk into a store and they'd go, "Hey, how's your daughter doing? Or how's your son doing? Or what's happening in your life?" And they even knew what the person needed even before the person walked in. So that level of intimacy between shopkeepers and customers in so many ways was really present in the physical world. And I know that it was present not just in India, but present here too in, 40, 50 years back and it's still present in certain neighborhoods where you can walk into your neighborhood store and the person may
Mm-hmm.
greet you and say, "Hey, here's a hammer. And why do you need a hammer? Because I know you're building a shed in your backyard," right? And to me, that's really what social commerce is a lot about, is that intimacy, that connection, and we're all craving for it. We don't want to just be a number or a cookie on the desk, I mean, would
Yeah.
you
And
take up as a cookie?
I know.
That's what
I
we
actually,
got.
I like cookies though. Like, I'll take the cookie. I don't know.
No, I'll take a cookie to eat.
We, but I think like you're talking about personalized recommendations. I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, I remember when I first graduated Berkeley, there was this shop in San Francisco called Ambiance, and it was a little bit above the price point that I could afford at the time, but it was so well curated. And when you walked in, the ladies who, and they were curators, we didn't call them that, but they knew what you needed. Like they could tell I was a girl who was just entering the workforce, who needed to transition from jeans to something more. Like they could advise you, they could point things out. And I think that's the kind of magic. And I think sort of where I think Poshmark really started to become interesting. But before we get to Poshmark, let's go back to the things I uncovered about you, which the other thing, which I cannot believe I did not know this. I feel like I've now missed out on a decade of like, I could have done this with you and had hobbies with you, but I found out that you were part of the Mexican dance club at UT
Oh
Austin.
my
And
God. No. Let's not.
but hold on, you weren't just part of it, Manish. You actually performed.
I know. Yeah. So when I first came to this country, I was at University of Texas in Austin, and I wanted to do something that was localized, and so I just became part of a Mexican folk dancing group because Ballerina de Folclórico de Universidad de Texas. I'm trying to recall the name.
Yes.
And part of what we learned was all these folk dances, and we got opportunities to perform them across the state. But one of my proudest moments was performing. I'd been in the country for about 14 months, and we got an opportunity to perform at the state capitol of
Wow.
Texas. And we performed a song called La Bamba, which is a Mexican wedding song. And in that song, when you're dancing, you actually take a flat ribbon and through the dance, the men and the women convert that into a bow. And that is a fun sort of process to do that. And that's what we perform. So that's sort of my vivid memory of that time.
Was that like what you told Asha to woo her over? Does she know about this?
I don't think you knew about that.
I really wish that the iPhone existed then so I could unearth this performance. You better be so happy I could not, because I really would have, okay?
I know. These days you can't outlive anything. Everything is fully recorded and
I know.
memorialized,
I know. It's so funny. Okay, so you're at UT Austin at this point. What are you, 19? Because you're like a child genius. And you thought you were going to get your PhD, but you chose not to. Why?
Well, I did. I was doing a degree in computer science, and what I was working on was these database operating system things. And after a year or two, I just was getting bored, and I felt like I wasn't learning as much, and I wanted to apply it in real life. And I felt like there was a whole world that was missing from me. So I asked the professor, and he said, "Now you can wrap up this thesis as a master's degree and take off." And so I just wrapped it up as a master's degree and started looking for jobs and found my first job in Silicon Valley.
Yeah. And it was not in fashion. It was in technology, though, but very, very different than what you're doing today, right?
Yeah, no, the first job was actually with Intel in semiconductors, and I was doing database work for them to store semiconductor design data in custom databases, and I was in charge of building those databases, which was part of my master's thesis at that time. So yes, a far cry from helping people sell clothes online or even shopping for clothes or thinking about clothes.
And it's probably in and about this time, I mean, a little bit later, but let's talk about your pivot because I think a lot of people, especially now, I feel like it's not just the pandemic accelerating the future in technology, but in general, things are moving so, so, so fast that you're constantly finding yourself having to, I guess now we have words for this, upskill, but also pivot. And you ended up pivoting to something more on the consumer side with Caboodle. Let's tell our audience a little bit about that because I think that was such an interesting time. And actually, that's where our worlds collided.
That's what our words collided. Yeah, no. So for me, what happened was we were coming out of I was coming out of this company, and we were working on something, and we started to buy a house. So Ash and I bought a house, and we started to remodel it. And through that, this sort of whole problem of online shopping, and at that time I used to call it collaborative shopping, which we renamed social shopping later, was just very hard to do. And this is just to kind of remind you, this is 2003. So almost 18 years back, we were seeing these issues. And I just kept coming up with the idea and kept dismissing it. I said, I'm a database guy, I'm an enterprise software guy. Who am I to be doing a consumer company? I know nothing about it. Went on for 3, 4, 5 months. And then every time I looked at something, I said, "Oh, I could solve it with this that I visualized. I could solve that." It wasn't just about shopping anymore. It was about travel. It was about restaurants, about everything. And so once that desire became so hard to suppress, I had to figure out a way to do that. And the way I
Mhm.
did it is sort of the way I operate in many circumstances, which is how do I build a tribe that can take me from here to there? So I first sat down and wrote the thoughts on piece of paper. And then I started to find out how do I meet with people who can bring it. I had natural contacts in technology. So I ended up meeting with Chetan, who's my co-founder at Caboodle and is my co-founder at Poshmark. And he's been a partner in crime for 15, 16 years. Our kids were going to the same school. So we ended up running into each other. I said, this is my idea. Would you sort of come? He didn't know anything about consumer or me, but he said, I know about technology. Let's start to talk. I had a bunch of consumer people that I had to bring it. And I tapped into my Indian IIT Kanpur network, Thai network. And then I said, I need to surround myself with people who really understand consumer. And that's where Thai came in, right? So I was volunteering my time at Thai. That's when we met. And through
Mhm.
that process, I created the first consumer internet SIG. And they were just amazing people. I was able to get there. Reid Hoffman, who's, as you know, is the founder of LinkedIn. Uh, James Currier, who became my mentor, and as a mentor, he's the founder of NFX, and many other amazing people. David Z, who's one of the top guys at Greylock, uh, early investor in Facebook. So we brought these people together, and I got an opportunity to learn from the best. And so to me, that journey was a commitment to go from here, which is very hard to go from enterprise to consumer. There are so many principles that are same, but so many principles that are different. And it took many years to do that. And to do that, I had to let go under the mentorship of these folks and go forward. So that's how Caboodle started, was a lot of rejection, working through an incubation period. It took from the time the idea got conceptualized to the time we committed to doing it full time, took a year of commitment. That's how long it took. Because I had young kids, we had to go through the process. We finally started the company in my garage and then raised seed money in chunks, 25, 50K at that time. Um, And we raised the first 250K, and I committed to the investors that I'm not going to spend a penny till we get to 500K. And then we slowly got to 500K. And then suddenly the floodgates open, and that's another whole story. And we got to 1.5 million. And that's how the Caboodle journey started.
How did you know? Because I don't know, you probably get this question a lot too. Like a lot of people will come to you with, I want to start a business. These are my one, two, three ideas. Uh, and they don't know how to pull the trigger. And how did you know when to burn the ship? When that's it, like there's no going back, there's no plan B. I'm burning it. I'm going. How do you know that it's that moment for you?
Oh, it's a really, really good question. It's a really good question. So let me give you a little bit of the history in Caboodle and in Poshmark. So
Yeah.
Caboodle, when I started that journey, they're different journeys because my surety in Poshmark was faster, so the burning time was faster. But in Caboodle, it was a slower time. So I formed what I called a kitchen sink cabinet, which was a bunch of these folks who would come to my house every weekend, and it would be Chetan, it'd be guys from consumer side, technologists, some of the folks who became part of Caboodle, some of them who didn't. And I would, before I got them there, I would say, here's my vision, here's my ideas. I was very open in sharing the basics of it, but then the detailed white paper, they would only get access to after they'd signed some paperwork. Their only commitment was to show up on Saturday morning, and we would give them hot tea and samosas, right, or whatever snack they had. Spend 2 3 hours, and through that process of just having people come every weekend, it started to become clear who was committed and who was not. And some people came once or twice, some people came sporadically, and some people came regularly.
How do
Right?
you know they didn't just come for the hot samosas though?
I,
Because I
I
might
was,
have
I
just
was, hey, it's the cheapest way of lead qualification. Think about it, right? If you come
yeah.
to hot samosa, then you disappear. Either you didn't like the samosa, you didn't like the idea. Either way, it was a quick wedding out, and they kept going through this process. And we, without any sort of formal structure, we created a basic prototype. But the thing I did was throughout the whole process, I was very upfront and clear with each person. I said there are 4 outcomes that are possible. We all move forward and we do nothing, or we all move forward and we all jump into this together, right? And if we do and we all go through without pay and we move forward, you'll be a co-founder, you'll get double digits in equity. If the third option is you advise, you do some good work, and then you move away, you'll be kind of like an advisor or a consultant. We'll give you very tiny equity, or we may give you some cash based on what we have, right? Fourth thing is you're not comfortable in joining the beginning of the journey, but once we raise financing, you join, you'll be an early employee. In that case, your equity might drop to 1/4%, 0.5%. That was a clear conversation I had with someone who showed some 3 4 time interest. So that when we came to the point that the prototype was real, I had everyone come in, we had the prototype. I said, this is the beginning of Christmas, but let's go back and think about it. Who wants to join in? And I said, I'm going to also think about, do I want to jump in because I have 2 young kids? Do I commit? Very thoughtful process. And I said, if we do decide to commit, let's share our financial situation so we know that we can be covered for about a year at least, and that will be the time. And the funny thing was, there were a bunch of technologists, bunch of consumer, all the consumer people didn't believe the idea would work. So the only people who joined was me and a couple of other technologists.
Wow.
So I had to
That's
make a decision to get 2 technologists rather than one consumer and one technologist. I was able to luckily get both the technologists, and we started the journey. And we said we'll be in it for a year, and we shared our financial situations. We knew we could sustain it, and we were lucky to get the funding done early, and that's sort of how we started that journey. This is, way before all the combinators and other sort of processes were there. So we didn't have any backup net. We just had to commit. Case of Poshmark, it was completely different in the sense that because of the success, I had definitely seed money available. I could have done a little bit of funding myself. There, after going through Caboodle, I wanted to really create a team. I knew I wanted something in fashion and community, but I wanted to create a team that would serve that. So there, I intentionally said, I need someone who grew up in the fashion business. Likely it's going to be a woman, but didn't have to be somebody who really natively understood fashion. And the tech side, I had many people, including my co-founders from Caboodle. And so through that journey, I ended up talking to a bunch of people, met Naveen at Mayfield. He connected me to Tracy. Tracy had just moved here from New York and was really looking to partner up with someone who understood tech and products. And I just saw and we just clicked, and we are here together 10 plus years later. So that's how Poshmark started, was real connection and focus on people. Very similar to Caboodle, but in a very accelerated time frame because of sort of what we were doing. And then Poshmark, a basic idea was there in my mind before, but when I saw iPhone 4, it kind of re-popped up. And I was bringing a bunch of ideas to Tracy. She was bringing ideas. We could never sort of align on it. When I re-brought Poshmark to her and a couple of the other co-founders, we were like, this is it. Then we took it to Mayfield, and it just sort of clicked very quickly because it made sense. The big bets we made at that time was 100% mobile, 100% social, 100% transactional. And those were harder bets to make. So it was different in Caboodle. It took almost a year. In case of Poshmark, I think it went from the time when the idea clicked to the time where we got the funding is 3.5 months because of, again, the journey and the success prior to that.
I remember, do you remember this? That we were at Magic and I met you and Tracy. Do you remember this? And you were telling me about the idea. And I just remember because Tracy really loved, I think it was J. Crew, and I did it. And we just really bonded. And I totally remember, but here's the crazy part. We were talking about the idea. What do you think about the idea if you were telling me the idea if you were going to sell things from your closet? And I said, I think that's brilliant, but people have the picture matters because that's what sort of I had learned from what I was doing at the time. And this was before Instagram. So, I think this is what I want to sort of emphasize right now when we talk about Poshmark is how your ability to be a futurist to some extent and kind of pick up on the right moment was really critical because this idea you had was before people even knew that they could put filters on a picture, which sounds stupid now because we all know how to edit pictures. But back then, no, that wasn't a no-brainer. Like you said, the iPhone was brand new. So I think that was such an interesting moment. And I also, so this goes back to my list of things I've learned about you that I did not know is that during that period, you stopped using a laptop or a desktop because you were going to go mobile first, which again, we could do very easily now, but back then, not so easily.
Yeah, no. So I think that's three really interesting points you made. I think first is when you're making a bet, after you sort of decide the bet you're going to make, you need to really commit to it. And you need to, and it's actually one of my other mentors, Kanwal Rake, he talks about the fact that as an entrepreneur, he says I'm going to use a word that he uses, YAFO, right? Which is yet another opportunity, right? So we think of everything as like this. And sometimes that ends up broadening our spectrum so much that we are trying to do too much. So narrowing it down is really, really important. So in this case, mobile, social transactions, that even though the technology is enough ready, but not completely ready. And you're right, people didn't have iPhone 4s. We had to buy video iPods to give people to even do beta testing because they didn't have their own iPhone at that time. The second thing I think is really, really, really knowing that what you're going to be able to do in the next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years is exponentially higher. And you're at the beginning of that journey. And this is where timing and luck matters a little bit, right? Because we could have been in 2008, I could have bet on mobile, and we were 2-3 years from the technology maturing, and 10. And that's where I feel like there's a synthesis of different factors is crypto too early? Is crypto too late? Right? Like that kind of a thing. And you have to sort of, sometimes you can be a little too early. I don't think it's ever too late. I think there's always innovation possibilities available. And then the last thing is, if you are going to do something, you got to go full hog. So to me at that time, it was mobile, but even in fashion, I've gotten full hog. If you look at Tracy,
Gucci
conversation,
Gucci
no, but it's not just. It's also buying. Like I buy everything on Poshmark. You have to be there. You have to be part of whatever you are trying to do, and it has to be authentic. It can't be fake. So those three things are there. I couldn't talk about mobile, and I'm here typing away on my laptop. So focus, real focus, knowing sort of where the wave of technology and other pieces are, because technology is really a great enabler for so many ideas. And third thing is really immersing yourself and believing that you can do it. And the third thing can be sometimes hard because you may not fully trust yourself that you can do it. But hey, if an IITM from India technologist can start a women's fashion company, then you can do anything.
I love that. I love that. I have another memory from that period, which I think before I remind you of this memory, I think this goes to something you quickly touched on, which was the speed in which Poshmark went from A to B. Because we have this conversation at Magic. I can't even remember anymore what month Magic is in. But
it was I remember it clearly.
You do? Okay.
February 2011. We met
Yes.
on the floor of Magic, and then
Yes.
we sat
We had,
down at
we
what
had
was then the
drinks.
Mandarin Oriental, because you
Yes.
told me that's a very quiet hotel. That's where you stayed. So Tracy and
Yes.
you and I were sitting there. That's when you were giving us feedback, and we were discussing with you. I
Yes.
remember that very clearly, and I think that hotel has changed its name or something.
It
And
has. Yes. Yes. And then just, I want to say it was almost, it felt like a few weeks later, we're back in the city where I was living at the time. And you, Tracy, and maybe it was Chaitan, invited me to it wasn't called Posh Party yet, but it was an early party at a boutique. It was not ambiance, but I don't remember the name of the boutique. And
Mhm.
it was so new that we didn't even know, like, there wasn't a testing environment where I could download on my own the app. Like, Chaitan was putting it on my phone, which I remember thinking, because I didn't know Chaitan, like, wait, you're going to take my phone? Like, what are you going to do with it? And he put the app on, and we were learning how the app was working. Do you remember that?
Oh, very clearly. That really,
Yes.
thanks for reminding me. So this was actually the genesis of the virtual posh parties, which have become our live events. Is we threw these 5 at 5 things where the goal was to invite a few women, have them bring a couple of items to list, get the app installed. An app install at that time was an excruciatingly painful thing because there was no
Exactly.
test flight, there was no beta. So I know my entire dev team was sitting in the boutique. I mean, just visualize it for a second. Alexandra, you can.
I
And
can. I
they're
was
sitting
there
there, this really tiny boutique on
in the
Mission
stock
Street
room. He
in
was
that
in the
art room.
stock
Yeah,
room.
yeah. And then people would bring their phones, or we would give them a video iPod, and there would, I think, maybe 12 women who showed up, or 13 women through our personal contacts. We had some wine. They were taking photos. Uh, they had a gift certificate to that boutique. I'm forgetting the name of the boutique, but I know the owner. She's still involved with Poshmark, and the boutique doesn't exist anymore. And so that whole sort of experience was really just plowing through and getting user feedback. And I think we were in the third or fourth month of development. I think this was like May or June of
Yes,
2011. We had
it was
started
so quick.
very early, and that was sort of part of the thing. Was we had maybe 10 users, 15 users, 20 users. I think by October we had maybe 100 users. By December, 400 users. By March, almost 15 months after we started, we maybe had less than 1,000 users. But we were learning a lot, and the engagement was there, and activation was there. So being very, very, very close to the customer, however you can, is super critical in the early days.
And I bring this up not only to, of course, reminisce, but mainly because when you look at Poshmark today, I don't think that someone looking at Poshmark today would realize that when you start a company, it really is that, is scrappy the right word? I don't even know what the right word is, but like, it's person to person. And I think people, and I've said this before, but honestly, it's the thing that actually still surprises me, is that we overestimate what we can do in the first year or two and underestimate what we can do in a decade. And to me, this is why I bring this up. Like, can you imagine, Manish? We were in a boutique, like there was no test flight yet. Like some random guy took my phone. I just got my iPhone. So I was like, okay, don't steal it. And like, you know, it was such a different time. And now we see this scale today. So let's fast forward a little bit. And, you know, this is something that I only learned by reading. I didn't know this at the time, that even though I know you had some initial funding to get Poshmark off the ground, 200 investors said no. I want you to paint the picture of that time, because I think it's, what strikes me is not, you know, sometimes I feel like these things are like sales. Like, it's not even anything personal. It's like the moment and volume. But at the same time, there, I feel like, how did you not get discouraged? How in that moment do you have so much of like a, yes, this is the right thing, even though I'm sure some of the 200 people are people you wildly respected who are still saying no.
Yeah, no, it's a really, really hard time because
Yeah.
we had gotten early funding from really great believers, and now we were
Yeah.
looking for what would be called today Series B. For it was a Series C. And at that time, the level of requirement that people kept putting on us kept shifting, right? So it would be like, okay, this is great, but no, your cohorts are slightly off. This is great, but your gross margin is only this month. This is great. And so it was like, it takes too much of this, it takes too much of that. And partly it was a combination of 3 or 4 things. I think people didn't understand this space at all. It's almost the antithesis where there's so much funding has gone into this space. It's shocking. Second is many of the people, because we were not selling luxury fashion, that was not sort of our focus. We sold luxury, but our focus was everyday fashion. It was not in the core of any of our investors' target, right? And third thing is we were kind of an unlikely team to do this business, like really
Mm.
unlikely team. And
Why
so
would they think that? You were already doing it. It doesn't seem
no, but
unlikely to me.
but it's still like this is the interesting sort of combination. And so when you put all of these pieces together, it was just hard. I think between
Yeah.
14 and 15. And what would also happen, and this is something you have to know about the dynamics of different teams, is you could convince. Let's say I'm coming to you, right, as an investor, and you're part of a partnership. I could convince you. You'd be like, Manish, this is it. But
Right.
then you have to convince your,
Everyone else.
and it is a whole different ballgame. So many of the things where it happened was the partner would come in and they would be like, "This is it. We're going to do the deal," and then they would try to sell it to their partnership, and it would just start to fall apart. And the challenge that the market was, if you look at our first set of slides, which we just recently published, so many things have come true, but actually the market sizing has come true 10x more than what we would imagine. What we are forecasting
Wow.
there to sort of where we are today is just so much bigger. And that was hard for people to know that how would this exist, because the only metaphor was eBay. And at that time, eBay was, going sideways, and just nobody really thought that this space would be what it is today. And the other problem was that people thought phone was a great thing, but you really need to have a big web presence. And even many years into the business, we were primarily a mobile app, which today seems so laughable,
Silly. Yeah,
but 7 years back it was still a
I
thing.
know.
Right? We didn't have a really robust website that was fully scalable till 16 or 17. And so we were really an app company, primarily an iPhone app company. We launched, I think, Android in 2014 or 2015. So the combination of those things was challenging. The thing that kept us going, and I remember one time, I think Tracy and I were sitting because we were the pitch people, so we would just go pitching door to door. We were sitting at a restaurant in San Francisco. I was this investor who had like committed. He was calling me. I said, Tracy, I don't want to pick up the phone because I know what he's going to say. And she said, Manish, don't pick up the phone. I said, no, I have to talk to him. And of course, he was going to say no. So it was like literally that kind of a feeling. But what was amazing was that and our life with our customers and our community was exactly the opposite of each other, like almost
Wow.
complete contrast. I'm getting We get fan mails from customers. We're seeing such great engagement, 27 minutes a day. Our community is so passionate. We're going out and serving our customers, talking to them. So that's what kept us going through these things. We would know we were on a magical journey. We know what we were providing was tremendous value economically, environmentally, and just socially. And the stories we would hear about people fighting poverty, people fighting homelessness, people getting out of abusive relationships using Poshmark, etc., were just so staggering that I said one day people will believe, and to think that we are a public company today and sort of still feel like we have decades and decades worth of journey ahead of us as a social marketplace is so exciting to see over the course of 5 years. So my advice for this, Alexandra, would be I think it takes periods of disbelief for belief to happen. And by the time belief happens, you're already thinking of something else. And it's almost like a lot of the external feedback is somewhat of a trailing indicator of what you've already worked on. So
Mm.
don't get too enamored with the negative feedback. At the same time, don't get enamored with the positive feedback because it's also a trailing indicator of what you've done. You have so much more to do. So for us, when we look into the future, there's so much more to do. And we're so excited about where we are going as the world shifts to online, secondhand, social. We just launched video on the platform. It's so amazing to see all of that thriving. And so I'm so excited about what's to come and so grateful and happy for where we've been, but more just focused on the future.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that advice is so spot on. I mean, you're right. It feels obvious that about the negative, but also not to believe all the positive. Yes, I have learned that the hard way too.
It's like Gita, right? It's like Gita. You got to
Yes.
focus on your karma, right? The fruit
Yes.
will manifest. And then once fruit manifest, it's the sum total of the karma till that point. And you got to do the karma for the next point, right? So what's happening today is already happened, right? And now you got to invent the future. So it's very actually, we're both Indian, so we can talk, but it's very spiritual, right? Is the present is the sum total of all your actions in the past, and the future is the sum total of all your actions you're about to take.
I mean, absolutely. Although we're all still I'm still trying to control my future, seeing if I can edit my karma in some way. My mom, I remember growing up, we went to India and I forgot where, but like you would literally crawl under the cow and somehow it would take away your karma. And I remember telling my mom, because I was I think I was a junior and I was waiting for college acceptances. So I remember telling the guy in India, can I go under the cow like 100 times? Like,
Alexandra, you are doing amazing. And then have like, oh my God, what are you talking about?
so yeah, actually that brings up a good point. Maybe I need to find a cow. But you touched on something that I think is what I think we could have predicted, but is so amazing, is how many women you have empowered. Yes, I'm not talking about the shopping side, people, which I'm like constantly looking for things and window shopping on Poshmark, but the women's lives that you have changed. We talk so much on the show about if you want to start a business, and as you just laid out, you have to figure out the market, you have to get funding, but a lot of people need quote unquote entrepreneurship out of a box. They need community. They need something that is near and dear to their heart. So share some of the stories of the lives that have been changed by these sellers, because I love those stories.
No, they're so powerful and they are so inspiring, and they inspire us to keep coming back and doing what we are doing. I'll tell you a couple of stories. So I remember we were at Posh Fest, which is our annual conference in Los Angeles. Me and my chief operating officer, John, we were just chatting. And this woman who was at the show came up to us and goes, Mr. Chandra. And typically when somebody's saying that, they're about to give me some good feedback on the product. And I was open. I was vulnerable. That's what the point of the
Why,
conference.
if they say your first name, they're going to give you bad feedback? Is that what
No,
happened?
no. I just, formally they're like trying to give me something. It's a daytime, so she's there, and I'm like, John, let's hear out, because you're constantly sort of getting feedback, and you're taking this. The
Yep.
whole point of the conference is obviously to share knowledge, but get a lot of feedback. So we're there, and she goes, I just want to tell you something, and I said, sure, no, please, we're open, and she goes, well, I have to tell you about my daughter, and she actually just recently escaped an abusive boyfriend by using Poshmark. So apparently, this woman is from Alaska. She had brought 3 or 4 women with her to learn about Poshmark so they could guide other women, because she runs an abusive women shelter and abused women shelter. And then her daughter had um, gone with boyfriend and had a baby, and they were in Oklahoma, and he was very controlling. And so he controlled everything, took away everything from her, but didn't take her phone. And because she was only shipping packages out, there was nothing coming in. It just kept going. And then she was able to save her money through the power of the amazing Poshmark community, develop the self-confidence to, with the money and with that power, get out of that relationship and escape that situation. I mean, that is, to me, one of the craziest things, you second order, third order things that you do, which are really, you don't, this was
We'll talk
definitely
about good karma,
good
Manish.
karma. Totally, totally, totally. And then another one is, our community is so amazing in supporting other members of the community. So I remember this one woman was going through separation, everything else, and didn't have any money to even get inventory to sell, and she had to leave everything behind, with her former, I forget, was husband, whatever it was, and she had a kid, and so the community rallied behind her, and several of them packed up boxes of stuff and inventory to have her to sell, and she literally got,
Wow.
I think, $5,000 or $10,000 worth of inventory shipped from different households across the country to sell it. And then most recently, we had a woman who's part of our community who was in a terrible, terrible accident, and she's still recovering. And the community again rallied to do sort of fundraising. And these are people, some have met with each other over the years, some have never met with each other, but the level of connectivity and support that happens is just amazing to see. And I think, to me, if you think about the power of community, it pays back into the society, into the platform in unexpected ways once you foster it.
Yeah. I mean, that just touches me. And over the years, I've been following some of the stories of some of these women, and it just like brings tears to my eyes because, females being financially empowered is just a game changer. And I think that's why I advocate so much to see more females in rooms that they still aren't at the highest levels. But, what you're doing is a space where females are dominating. Am I right with that in terms of numbers? Are most of your sellers females?
We have a very, very strong women's community. We
Yeah.
started primarily focused on women's fashion and then
So
launched men in
inspiring.
2016. So we've been on that journey for a long time. And, I completely agree with you that there is both the economic empowerment, but I think there's also mutual and social empowerment. And I think
Mhm.
that is also very powerful because the way we built the platform is really, they're probably one of the very unique marketplaces where each seller intentionally has to support the next seller in order to win. And so, for example, we have this thing called curation and sharing. So you have to curate each other's items for both gaining your own following, but also getting exposure to your item. So it's an engine where people are spending time curating each other's systems and promoting each other. And that is something that is built as at the platform level. Similarly, when people are engaging on the platform, they are really helping each other. For example, we have a welcome program where people are really invited to welcome other Poshers. It's called the Namaste program internally. And a lot of times when you join Poshmark, you will have some other Poshers in a very authentic way saying, "Hey, welcome, Alexandra, welcome to Poshmark, and here's sort of some of the tips, and I can always help you." So that whole spirit, which is both great for the person who's giving that welcome and the person who receives it, is how I think about life, which is win, win, and win. Everyone needs to win together.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's so much more I want to talk about, but before I move forward, I want to talk. I just love this story. So for people that, if I just may just lay out how Poshmark works, and you can correct me, but you get there, you download an app and you can use Poshmark in two ways. Either you can sell clothing or items, and now you have other things like pet items. You can sell your husband's clothes, although my husband Prashant would be mortified if I did that without telling him. but but wait, actually, maybe I should. Some of the items. Never mind. I hope he's not listening. And, but you basically can list your items, and other people can buy them. So it's a way for you to make money out of the items you might not be using. Or the flip side is that you can buy items, like really cool items, like Gucci belts and Gucci shoes, for example, all the way to just a summer dress for a holiday. Um, and so there's a part of this process, though, that is the part of the story I really like, which is shipping became a really big challenge for you. And you found yourself in a very sticky situation. Can you tell that story?
Sure. So when we started the company, we wanted to take a really, really, really simple approach to shipping. We knew that everyone wants to ship and sell things. People don't have any sense of how much an item weighs, how to ship it, what to do. And the third thing is people may spend weeks thinking about an item, but when they want it today because they need to wear it tomorrow, right? And so our community was built on these things. So we said we need to ship everything super fast. Everything goes on priority shipping in the United States for Poshmark, and which is 2 to 3 day shipping. And we created this system where you don't have to worry about the weight. Everything up to 5 pounds shipped with the same label. How do you do it? So we went to the local postal agencies and asked them, this is what we want. Do you have a solution? They said, no, we have this solution and that solution. Then we went to the corporate headquarters of USPS. We said, we want a solution. They said, no, 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 we don't have a solution. So we said, okay, we'll create our own software driven solution where we abstract everything and then use their APIs to create the solution. Now, as we are doing it, some packages are a little bit above the crossover point and some packages are a little bit below the crossover point, but at the net, they are actually below what we were paying for. So on a blended basis, we are paying more than what we needed to pay to USPS, but on individual packages, some were a little bit below, some were higher. So we kept doing this, and it was fine when the volumes were small. And suddenly, I think from 2012 to 2013, in 4 months, our volume spiked up by 10x. And as it did, the volume became big, and we came under the notice of United States postal inspectors. So one morning, we're in our executive team meeting, and there's a knock, and two guys walk in, and we need to speak to Manish Chandra and our head of marketplace operations, Olivia walks me and says, I handle, you guys are from USPS, let me know. I said, no, 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 we can only speak to Mr. Chandra. And we know he's in there, we've tracked him down. And I'm like, okay. So I walk out and they sit me down and they walk through their thing. And they said, sir, here's the thing, you have to pay these many millions dollars in fines. We actually have the right to arrest you. And you have to correct it in this time. So I said, he said, there's so many ways to correct it. You can do this, you can do that. I said, let me tell you, we don't actually see any of the items we're shipping. They're all being shipped by our buyers and sellers, and they're all doing the right thing, except it's simpler. So I walked them through the whole thesis, walked them through the processes, had a long discussion with them. We went back and forth, but our problem, they'd never even studied. So they had no idea what I was talking about. And so finally we had to sign an affidavit that we'll go rectify it. Took that affidavit, I took all of the papers they gave me, took a copy of it, and sent it to the chief marketing officer of USPS. And I sent it to the head of Northern California. And those people are still, I mean, the CBO is not there, but the head of Northern California is still there. She still comes to our conferences. That was then escalated to the United States Post Inspector and Postmaster General. And then they finally sat down and said, I said, what are you guys doing? We have one of the highest, fastest growing volumes. And instead of receiving the red carpets, you send us handcuffs. How does it even make sense? And here I keep hearing these dire state warnings of USPS. So all of that discussions then led to, in 2014, creation of Poshpost, which is the country's first fashion shipping label in partnership with USPS. Still today, it's a unique partnership, very simple. Anybody can sell any item, slap it on the package, ship it. It all goes priority and still ships in a very simple way. And if you can imagine, in 2012, our shipping label fee was $7. And we supported up to £3. As of today, our shipping label fee is $7.45, right? In that time, there's been so many postal hikes, and the allowance is £5. So this bet has allowed us to scale the business in numerous ways through that sort of whole process by continuing to believe in the simplicity and fighting for the right. And that's something we've done on many different fronts. I think we just took on too many battles, so still have a lot of battle scars, but this was one of the battles we fought, and we're able to convince them that this is a win-win thing. And one of my visions was that one day this partnership is so successful, this United States Postal Service recognizes it as an important partnership. And last year, they actually gave us one of their top partnership awards because we've become such a, it's become a great, healthy partnership on both sides after, years of being a partner.
Isn't that incredible? I just love that story. You've told me that story before, but I just love it. Like, it's such a great story because, I mean, first of all, the fact that you can get something done with a governmental agency, I think that is like a reason investors would even walk away, right? And for you to turn that into something so incredible, I mean, kudos. That's incredible. Wow. Okay. So we've touched on a few things, and one of the things that you mentioned already, which is one of the things that I adore about the way that you think about business, is spirituality. And I remember, I don't know if it was like a decade, well, it has to be less than a decade ago, but I remember hanging out with you and I was at a crossroads and you had spoken to me about visualizing. And I was like, oh, I watched The Secret. I get it, but is this really going to work? But you said it, so I'm going to do it. And I think that this is such an important piece because you also mentioned battle scars. So to me, having the wherewithal to do something hard requires not just a foundation of a business plan. And yes, it helps to have good people and right financing, but you need a really strong internal foundation. And that's something, Manish, I have always respected you for. And I've learned so much from you from that point of view. So I don't even know where to start this, but just throw out your wisdom there. Now looking back, even what are some of the tools and techniques that you feel are, the ones that really taken you to where you are today?
I think the first thing is you need to have some sort of mental calming routine where you can calm your anxiety. And not all of the time you can calm it all the way. And I've had my own sort of things. I'm not saying, I can always calm myself. I'm like this, but you have to have it. I was lucky that when I was very young, when I was 13, there were some folks who came to my high school and taught us meditation. And so I was probably one of the few kids who from the age of 13 till 15 practiced meditation every single day. Then 15, I stopped, and then I picked it up again, I think in my late 30s. And that sort of whole journey of being a meditator has been very useful for me. That's one of the places I can go to. It gives me calm and peace. So that's one. I think the second thing is really surrounding yourself with people and with people that you can be vulnerable with, right? And that may change over time, but you need to be able to do that because if you don't have that as an entrepreneur, at least a few trusted sort of places, because it's a very lonely job. As an entrepreneur, as a professional, as a piece, that's the second thing, because sometimes our own psychology works against us, right? We're sort of putting ourselves, creating blocks that shouldn't exist, thinking about things that shouldn't happen. And then the third thing is thinking that someone else's life or someone else's psychology is in any way any different than yours. I feel like this is one of our core philosophies at Poshmark. We call it embrace your weirdness. But the core thing there is that I could be looking at you, right? And you could be looking at me, and you might be like, Manish must be fairly normal. What is on his mind? And I'd be like, Alexandra is perfectly normal. She seems to be just having a great time. And you could be looking at another person. But I'm sure if you boarded our mind, the kind of craziness that's happening in my mind and your mind and everyone else's mind is insane. And if somebody was able to broadcast that, we'd be like, oh, they're all equally weird and equally screwed up, right? And so the most normal looking person, the more sort of whatever you might say, traditional, mainstream, is going through the same kind of anxiety and issues in a different way than you are, than somebody else is. So just remembering that allows you to embrace other people's weirdness. And in that acceptance is a lot of growth and the opportunity. And the last piece is that I believe in every person, in every opportunity, in everything exists the potential for greatness. And so the way I kind of talk about it is that the greatness is not in the object of the person, the greatness is in the beholder, right? So if you look at something, you can take it to a whole new level. So somebody might look at a coffee cup and might think it's a coffee cup. Somebody might look at a coffee cup and see the opportunity to create a coffee cart. Somebody might look at that coffee cup and see an opportunity to create a coffee shop. And we know that people have done that. Somebody might look at that coffee cup and create a 3 or 4 coffee shops. But then someone looked at that coffee cup and created a Starbucks,
I love that.
right? And that to me is not the coffee cup, it's not the coffee shop, it's how you look at that. And so no matter what opportunity you're pursuing, whether it's in your career, in your life, in any destination, I really feel that has to happen. And then the final thing, this is something really powerful, is if you don't know where you're going, then you'll reach wherever you don't want to. And that is secret, visualization, manifestation. So every year when I start, or every 1 or 2 years, I write in vivid detail what should be happening, sometimes in my life, but a lot of times, at least in the business life. So when we started Poshmark, there's a December 2012 vision, and it says, Julie wakes up, she opens a package, and the package is coming this way. This is before we had written one line of code. And these papers exist. In 2018, June, I wrote, I think we went public in that Poshmark is now a public company. Here's sort of the things that are happening. Here's a number of countries we're present in. So you have to sort of visualize the future. And it may take, sometimes you think it may take 6 months, it may take 2 years, sometimes you think 2 years, it may take 6 months. But if you don't know where you're going, how will you reach there? And I would say that needs to be happen for everything, because sometimes writing the document is one of the hardest exercises you do. Because imagine if you could order anything, you could do anything. What do you want?
Yeah.
It's so hard,
Yeah.
right? And so that to me is really, really the last thing, is with all of these pieces, a lot of times people forget to do that first exercise. And my kids get frustrated because they're like, Dad, what should I do? I said, but what do you really want to do? And actually, when they sit down and they write it, they almost always get where they want to go. But a lot of time the confusion is you're going forward as opposed to knowing where you want to go and then working backwards.
Yeah, I love all of that. Speaking of kids, women get this all the time, how they balance a family life and work. And you have an amazing, cutest kids, amazing family. How did you do that? How did you balance uh, your life of being a startup founder and the ups and downs and still have such like, a beautiful, healthy personal life?
I would say I owe it a lot to my spouse, who has made a lot of sacrifices in terms of doing it, to an amazing ecosystem that we have around us of family, of friends, of help that has helped us. And then also intentionally finding time to
Yeah.
invest in home, in the kids, in the relationship. And actually the last year has been amazing from that perspective, because in the last year we've been really being able to engage with each other and grow. My kids are both grown up. One is just graduating from college. The other is actually restarting grad school after having worked and gone to college. So they're at a different time. And I think you have to build different relationships with kids as they grow up. They go from sort of people you're teaching to people who are teaching you. I've learned so much from my kids in the last year. So much growth has come from just talking to them. So I really enjoy. I think kids are just amazing, and you can learn so much from them.
Yeah. When they were little though, and you were in the thick of like the dropping them off and taking them places. And, how did you handle that balance?
Just plowed through it. I mean, when you started the company, both here and that, I had to go and your kids go to the same school. It was almost an hour away from home, so I would drop them and then go to work. So it was kind of like a journey, but it would actually give me time to talk to them. I remember I was on a board call one time, and my daughter was sitting there and she was giving me board advice on how to deal with my board members, and I was just chuckling away in terms of
Was
because she
it
had
good
to drive
advice?
through the whole thing. But she was like, this is what you should be doing here, Dad. And later, I mean, not live, but later on. So I got a lot of wisdom, and she was, I think, all of 11 years old at that time. So it was great. I mean, I think even driving can be really a great time if you are able to connect with them and talk and stuff. So you make do. I mean, I think, look, it's the same amount of time, and we are like choosing to build a company, to live our life, to be married, to have kids. So all of these things sort of come together. And I definitely think that as a guy, I really enjoyed the partnership with my spouse. So I'm really grateful for that. And I know that for women, it's even harder. So I have even more respect for how you guys balance everything, including my wife. So
Yeah. I love that your daughter is giving you boardroom advice. And I have to say, though, after going and learning about lunchroom politics from my son, dude, lunchroom politics is really hard. Okay. So she probably had some good advice.
oh, she always has very good advice.
Yes. Okay. So I know, and you've said this, I don't know if we talked about it here, but you've said this before, how two of the things that you love to do is meditate. And you mentioned it here. What do you have a particular style of meditation that you do, or do you just do a Headspace app, or like talk to me about that?
I've done Headspace and Calm more recently, but the first school I learned was transcendental meditation. That's sort of what I practiced in high school, and then more recently I got trained in Art of Living, and so
Yeah. Shri
that's
Shri
what I'm
Ravi
doing. And, yeah,
Shankar.
and I
Yeah.
combined a little bit of the two, but that's sort of the two styles I've learned. But I'm open to learning other kinds of meditation in the future. I think it's really more about just a way to center yourself, to calm yourself, to take that time. And I think it's besides physical exercise, I think it is really, really important, especially with COVID, but even before COVID. I mean, we do more intellectual jobs than we do physical jobs. So it's sort of having that. And in this time frame, the last 12 months, and having to go through all the pieces that all of us have gone through, I feel like meditation has been really a powerful tool.
The other thing that you do is read. And we have a segment here called CEO Binge Club, because I've been asking everyone what they've been reading. But since the pandemic, people have had all sorts of Netflix suggestions too. So we're very open minded here. But what do you feel like are the books or the content? No judgment. But what are the ones that you feel like have had a mark on your journey or your life, or, were just fun?
Oh, for
It could
fun,
be
I mean,
anything. Fun,
fun,
even.
fun is there's a lot of books. I mean, I love, I love, for example, all kinds of trashy novels. So that's like,
You
or
read
fun and
trashy
like,
novels,
yeah, I
Manish?
do, I do. But
Believe it. I don't
on
believe it.
in terms of spirituality, since we were there, I would say that there is a lot of wisdom I found in two or three books. One I actually gave at one point to every person in the company is The Alchemist by
Oh, I love
Paulo
that.
Coelho, right? And it is such a great book. I go to it over and over again. It's so powerful. And it ultimately, the essence of the book is that every treasure you're seeking is already within you. You're searching, but it's already here. So that's very powerful in terms of, you think about it. The other book I find really amazing is this philosopher who came to America in, I think, in the 20s or 30s, Khalil Gibran, I don't know the right way to say it, and Prophet. And there's so much wisdom, and something that I talk to my kids a lot about. That's sort of the second book I find. And then the other one, particularly if people want to take a path that's not uh, a normal path, or you want taking a path that's your own path, is a book called Jonathan Livingston Segal.
Mm.
And it is a book where the seagull doesn't want to be a seagull, and he or she is taking this different path, and so they feel very weird inside and they feel very different. And it's taken from this perspective of a seagull, and it's just an amazing book. So those are the three books I always sort of talk about as really great books, and I have them on my Kindle. So I keep going to them all the time, and their quotes, their wisdom, that's amazing. But for fun, there's just so many different books that you can read, from biographies to, I love Steve Jobs' biography. That was really, it's a long read, but it's really amazing. It's a very different perspective that you see in the movies. And on the fun side, I think what shows have you been watching actually?
Um, I saw this one called, I think it's called The One. And it's on Netflix and it's a series. And it's basically about this woman who she was a scientist in grad school and they figured out how to use DNA to find your soulmate. Okay. So that's the premise. She becomes like a big tech tycoon. And so for me, I felt like this, even though it's a ridiculous premise, this series was so eye-opening to me because I felt like we see equal opportunity in cinema because not because we see a powerful female, which is also exciting in tech, because she was evil. So I feel like if we see women being evil as CEOs too, that's got to be equal opportunity.
No, it's very true. It's very true. I haven't been able to watch like any sort of really kind of like darkish shows. I've been watching really fun and lighthearted shows through COVID because it just feels like the reality was so
I know.
crazy. So I love watching shows like Schitt's Creek. Just laugh through it,
So
and
funny.
it's very witty, but it's also really really funny, and a whole bunch of sort of, I would say, lighthearted shows and shows that have just been really really great to go through the pandemic. But after a while, it was almost you lose interest in shows. So I've been catching on music, and there's so much good music coming out right now. So it's so exciting. It's
Yeah.
good to see the world finally awaking a little bit.
Yeah, it is. It is. Okay, so I know you still have a lot to do with Poshmark and everything else you're doing, but at this inflection point, how much do you feel, how much do you attribute luck versus hard work?
Oh, I think it's a combination. I think luck is inevitable in everything we do, right? And I think if somebody says it's all just what you've done, it's not true. And luck comes in various forms. It comes where you were born. It comes with the circumstance you were given, not just current luck. That happened that we were on the digital side of the divide when COVID happened. Can you imagine being on the other side, on the physical side of the divide? That's luck too, because I could be pursuing an opportunity of that side just as well. The people you're married to, the people you're living with, the fact that we are in Silicon Valley, the fact that I was born in a place that I was given great education. I feel like all of those things determine, what you have. That's luck. And then you have to combine it with your own intention and focus and hard work. So there are things you can't control, right? There are things that are happening, including even today. And the things you can control. Things you can control are symptoms of luck and circumstances. Things you can control is hard work. So I would say luck is given to you, circumstances are given to you. Hard work is what you can intend. That's your karma. That's what you can focus on. And rest is, what it is. And so I definitely feel extremely, extremely lucky to be here, to be healthy, to be successful, to be talking to you on this lovely afternoon, and the fact that we met. So I just feel really blessed with everything.
Well, speaking of karma, I don't want to let you go without asking you about the Heart and Hustle Fund. Can you talk about that?
Oh, absolutely. We have been a community, and we are a community. Poshmark is really a community of amazing people. And one of the things that we want to do is to empower everyone's journey at every stage. So when we think of the Heart and Hustle Fund, we think of something that really starts at each stage and empowers them to move to the next stage. So it's focused on people who are early in their reseller and selling journey and people who are later. And it is a form of scholarship and an award that we give them. They have to apply, and we have an amazing group of people who are going to choose the winners, and they'll be given different size grants. So that's sort of the Heart and Hustle Fund. It's on a quarterly basis, so it'll launch, I believe, next week, and then in first week of April, and then it happens quarterly. So there's multiple chances. You have to have a certain level of engagement. You have to be a seller on Poshmark to apply. But beyond that, there's not a whole lot of requirements. You tell us who you are, tell us a little bit about your journey and why you want it, and that's it. And then you'll get a piece to kind of work. But it's also combining not just the money part, which is sort of something that is on top of mind, but a lot of mentorship and
Yeah.
support to really empower you to be successful. And we are working with people who can give them just amazing, amazing level of advice. So it's an exciting program. We're just starting to get into it, but it's something which is very much part of our core value, which is to support continuous growth in the team and in our community.
Yeah. I mean, when women support each other, magical things happen. And not just women, but allies. And Manish, you've always been such an advocate for women. You've always been generous with your time for me. And one of the things that I've always loved is that you're sort of saying the names of women in rooms that they aren't in to make sure that they have representation. So for that, I thank you. And it makes total sense to me that you would create a platform where women can sort of connect, empower, and just really radically financially change their lives. So, when women tell stories, their voices are heard, and you're a big part of that. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all the kind words. And look forward to actually, hopefully, meeting in physical life soon.
Yes, at this posh studio for everyone who's listening on the radio. Tune into YouTube because you have to see Manish's sign. I love it. Okay, great. If people want to connect with you, where can they find you online?
They can find me on Twitter, MARRC, and they can find that same handle on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Manish.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Have an amazing afternoon.
It's a wrap. Thank you.